Good afternoon, and welcome everyone to our event, The Changing Status Quo of Ethnically Diverse Entrepreneurs. My name is Philip Salter, and I'm the founder of the Entrepreneurs Network. And we're also the kind of secretariat of the APPG for Entrepreneurship. So basically it's our job to kind of inform MPs, policymakers, kind of peers about kind of what's important for entrepreneurship. And I'd say this is an area until now that we've been pretty neglectful on, to be honest. And this is part of us kind of rectifying that. And it will not be just one event. We're planning more with NatWest, another one in September, and kind of further work following that. In reaction to this, we've added it as a priority, a policy priority on the website. We've also invited one of our speakers today. We've got lots of speakers, and it's going to be kind of very kind of a quick event, you'll find, because we have so many great speakers and great people to talk with. We've invited Erika Brodnock to become an advisor as well on the research side of things. So as I say, we consider ourselves a do tank, not just a think tank, and we've worked with NatWest on many things over recent years. For example, launching the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor report, which is kind of the most kind of thorough data-led approach to entrepreneurship. We also launched the Rose Review, which is looks at female entrepreneurship. And I think that's an area that kind of intersects very much with the topic of today. So when we put this out to the APPG, the All Party Parliamentary Group, we've had dozens of MPs come back and want to be involved, and you'll see kind of one or two of them on today, but we expect many more to get involved. So the way this will work is that we'll have the opening speeches, very short, then I'll have a few questions, but it'd be great if you guys could put your comments in the chat as well. Just add your questions and I'll see them and we'll come to them towards the end. Feel free to put questions whenever you want and we'll pick them up later. So over first to Shania from NatWest, who's very much involved in this, and she'll kind of give you a bit of background and introduce the speakers.
Thank you very much, Philip, and good afternoon, everybody. At NatWest, we are really excited to be partnering with the Entrepreneurs Network, but it's always really extremely important, also timely topic. On the and a part of the team in the bank that folks this month also the agent representing communities how you so we can with the support that we offer to businesses as well as traditional banking products and services. We have a variety of programs that are designed to help enable and accelerate small businesses, and this includes some of you may have heard of our Business Builder program, which supports early stage businesses with digital and event-based learning, and also offers a digital community to enable startups to grow their networks and to share with and learn from their peers. For more established business owners, we have our Accelerator and FinTech Accelerator programs, and both these programs have been tailored to support businesses to grow and scale. They offer mentoring, coaching, and also an incredible network of peers to connect with. And we also have our digital NatWest Business Hub, which is a platform rich with content, including podcasts, videos, articles, and toolkits, which help to support businesses at all stages. And that's not to mention also partnering with organisations such as the Entrepreneurs Network, so that we can make sure that we're sort of touching base with our customers and really listening to what it is that they need. We're a massive champion of supporting diverse businesses, but we are aware that there is more that we can do in this space, and therefore that's why it's so important for us to be part of conversations such as the one we're going to have today. And I'm really excited to listen to the discussion, but also to hear some of the questions and challenges that some of you may be facing, so that we can work together to help to address these. But without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, which is Gagan Mohindra. If you'd like to come in and introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Shana, and thank you for NatWest for hosting this. Can everyone hear me? I don't know whether Philip and Shana can give me a head. So my name is Gagan Mohindra. I'm the Member of Parliament for South West Hertfordshire. I was elected just under 9 months ago, but my experience is within local government. I've been a councillor for the last 16 years. Prior to that, the day job was firstly in the city, worked for a large European investment bank. And then I joined the family furniture retail business, expanded that out, did some online ventures, as well as started in property. About 5 years ago, I left that business to concentrate on my passion for politics. So I've got a foot in both camps, both within entrepreneurship, but also within government and policy making. I'm looking forward to hearing from the excellent speakers we've got later on today.
Thank you, Gagan. And next, I'll be introducing Belle Ribeiro Addy.
I'm not sure.
Maybe she isn't on at the moment. Okay,
hear
so hi, yes. Sorry, I'll move on to our next speakers. So we have Erika Brodnock.
Hi there, I'm Erika Brodnock. I am the founder of software companies Charisma Kids and Cami, and most recently the founder of Extend Ventures CIC. I co-founded that with a few colleagues who are committed to understanding the plight of minority ethnic entrepreneurs and looking at how we may be able to diversify access to funding for diverse entrepreneurs. So I'm also a research fellow at King's College London, and I'm just about to start a PhD in the Inclusion Initiative at LSE. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you very much, Philip, for pulling this together, and Shania.
Great, thanks, Erika. Great. So next up we have Erika Brodnock. Over to you.
Hi everyone, I hope you can all hear me clearly. I'm Erika Brodnock, or Ez. I'm a founding member, principal, and the CTO in residence for ImpactX Capital. ImpactX is a venture capital fund dedicated towards supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs. So we invest in technology startups where the primary criteria is that one of the founders is from an underrepresented background. On top of that, I'm also the director and co-founder of an organization called Code Untapped. We're a digital skills accelerator that helps underrepresented technologists both increase their skills and learn the skills they need in order to build startups of tomorrow. A little bit more about me. My background was actually as a software engineer. I spent over 10 years in the investment banking technology space, 5 years at Lehman Brothers, 5 years at Credit Suisse. And then I co-founded a multi-award-winning fintech called Neighbour, which was a financial wellbeing business helping UK employees gain fairer access to finance. And then through that, I found myself doing a lot of public speaking around diversity and inclusion, and noticed that, frankly, there weren't enough people that looked like me who were actually doing the things that I was doing, which is why I then got involved in this very important initiative. That's it from me. Thank you.
Excellent. Great. Next we have Charmain Hayden.
Hello, again, lovely to be here. It's really important that we continue to have these conversations. And you mentioned something earlier about becoming a do tank, and I think that's really important. I'm the founding partner at Good Soul Venture Capital, and we too look at underventured founders, and we just see them as a really important, valuable set of founders that could actually harness the future of big business because they're underrepresented, because no one's looking at them, and because they actually have some amazing startup ideas also. I'm a founder first. I founded my first company 16 years ago, which was disruptive in its space, very different space. It was a modeling agency, and was able to see the difference that you can make once you start to take action. So I'm hoping that, you know, with the conversations that we have here and beyond, and I do hope that they go beyond just today's conversation, that we'll be able to help a little bit further to move the conversation along and to start to be able to provide genuine platforms for these people, and, you know, to assist people like myself and Erika to be able to make those investments and to be able to change those people's lives and their businesses, and hopefully make them become the new household names.
Great. I think that's all our speakers. So we'll kind of go to the first question. Great, everyone is joining us on screen. So the first question is a very broad one. It's kind of what you see as your key challenges. I mean, I guess everyone here has different expertise and different experiences. So talking from your own kind of experience would be great. So should we start with Charmain? It'd be great to know kind of what you see as the key challenges for kind of disrupting the status quo.
Yeah, of course. Well, for me, it definitely starts with a top-down approach. I think that LPs need to not only open their minds and their checkbooks, but also need to kind of really explore the landscape a bit better for deciding that we're trying to ask for something that's philanthropic. Yes, of course, we're trying to make sure that you recognize the people within these groups as human, and that should go without saying. But most importantly, being able to put your money where your mouth is. And I mean, even speaking to SoftBank the day before yesterday, they had started they started an impact fund and have realized that actually these groups are growing really well and are actually having great recourse, and are now setting up an equity fund specifically to focus on these. So if one of the largest funds in the world is recognizing that there is actually value here, I think that's really important. I think policy is incredibly important in being able to say that we all have a fiduciary responsibility, specifically fund managers, to be able to have to be the best stewards of capital possible. And if we're ignoring some groups that could be generating returns for whoever's providing our funds, then are we really doing our job properly? And I think we need to look at that across the board. It's not just about kind of including people because there is a hashtag or because it seems like the right thing to do. It's actually because we have a fiduciary duty and we're also there and we're supposed to be standing behind that. So I think that, you know, wherever there are groups of people that are willing to take the time and energy out to own those skills, find those founders, be able to present, you know, great opportunities and invest money and time, I think that they should be taken consideration all the way up to the top of the rungs and then fed down, because a lot of people focus on the fact that VCs themselves should be being more diverse. However, if people that provide the capital for them are paying attention, then we have a real leading case. That's me. I'll rest.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's a very thorough answer. Gagan, it'd be good to hear from you about your experience as a politician, but also as a former entrepreneur as well. You kind of ran business, and I think your family business, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, do tell us about your experience and also what your challenges were. There might be some connection issue here, so let's move on to Ez, and then we'll come back to you, Gagan, if we can kind of sort that out.
Hey, so it's a really interesting question, the challenges that we face. And, you know, you've got the challenges that we face as a fund, challenges that we face as individuals, and the challenges that we see in the market. So the reality is challenges that we face as a fund, very similar to what Charmain raised, you know. We're a fund, we're a first-time fund, we're raising investment capital to then invest in underrepresented entrepreneurs. And, you know, I've had the experience of raising money as a startup before. My previous startup, Neighbour, raised somewhere in the region of £150 million, right? So we did phenomenally well from that perspective. So I know the journey myself. I spent 10 years in the investment banking game. And yet, as what we are is technically a first-time fund. Our entire team are full of either experienced investors or experienced operational individuals. However, when you're raising money, the number one thing that they look for is, have you done this before? Have you done this before as a team? Are you a first-time fund? Raising money as a first-time fund is possibly the hardest thing you can do. And then raising money as a first-time fund with a focus on impact, and not just impact, but on focus on investing in underrepresented people, probably the hardest thing and the hardest thing and the hardest thing you can do. Charmain and Erika, you both are smiling and nodding along to this. They both know this as well, right? And if there was one thing that would remove a lot of the barriers that we have, it would be organizations like the BBB and other government bodies stepping in to provide support for experienced individuals like us, organizations like ours, to actually help the country put its money where its mouth is and help these organizations to grow. Because the biggest problem we see whenever you speak to a fund, whenever you speak to investors is, well, we don't have the pipeline. We can't find these people. ImpactX Capital has been running for 18 months. In my pipeline, I've got over 600 people that have either applied to us. We've spoken to or responded to around 400 just in 18 months. There's a demand for over £400 million worth of capital in that pipeline of underrepresented, predominantly Black founders that we've met or spoken to in the last 18 months. Someone's going to tell me there's a pipeline problem. There isn't a pipeline problem, there's a support and investment problem.
Great. If there's anything left after those two very kind of great answers, Erika, for you to add to that, that would be great.
So I'm going to echo what Charmain and Ez have said, in that there isn't a pipeline problem. We found is that there is a clear issue around first-time funds that are focused on Black founders being told that they can't be invested in because they're first-time funds. With more than 138 funds in the UK alone, we know that there isn't a problem with investing in first-time funds, because if there was, there wouldn't be so many of them. So we need to actually be realistic about what the problem is here and understand that actually there are some unconscious biases that may be dictating the reasons that first-time funds that are being raised by Black VCs and to support Black founders are not being invested in. And I think that starts from the top down. I do believe that we did a piece of research back in May as Extend Ventures, and we looked at the impacts of coronavirus on Black and multi-ethnic entrepreneurs, and we found that 48% of them openly said that they didn't expect to qualify and hadn't wished to apply for any government support. And I think that there's something that we need to do as a collective around redefining the narrative. I think that when we're speaking about multi-ethnic entrepreneurs, even I myself did it at the beginning of this webinar, we call them minorities. If you call somebody less than, is there any wonder that people are worried about making those investments? And if we start to change the narrative and we start to change the dialogue about underrepresented founders and stop calling them under anything or minor anything, and start looking at the fact that what we have here are untapped individuals who have a wealth of excellence, brilliance and economic gain to provide to the country. Professor Mondaram and Cream recently did a report for the Federation of Small Business and have cited that multi-ethnic entrepreneurs are going to be what gets the UK back on her feet through the economic downturn and post-coronavirus. And I think that really does need to be acknowledged. I think what we do as a community for the country needs to be acknowledged, and we need to start to change that narrative and to start to look at creating vehicles so that investments can be made that are in keeping with our population numbers. And to that end, I'd also like to kind of look at the word BAME, and I'm sure we'll get the opportunity to cover this a little bit more later on. But that acronym enables people to kind of be lumped together under one roof. I've never met a Black person that is offended by being called Black. I've never met an Asian person that's been offended by being called Asian. I meet people from a plethora of backgrounds that are offended by the word BAME. Why are we still using it? And what can we do to start to actually look at 4% and 14% and what are the other percentages that we represent within the populace being provided through venture capital so that everybody has an equal chance to create sustainable businesses.
Great, thank you again. And you're being very kind, because you didn't mention the fact that when I approached you to speak about this, I used the term BAME, and that, you know, that's why we have a different title. So yeah, no, we really appreciate that, and I think, yeah, you can certainly kind of see that that's an, you know, that's an area where, you know, where we've kind of certainly can improve on. In terms of, I guess the next question I had is around government, and obviously you've covered a lot of that already with the British Business Bank. Is there anything else that could be done by the government, whether that's maybe through the education system? So we have a question here from the CEO, from Sharon Davis, from the CEO of Young Enterprise, asking about kind of how we can support underrepresented groups in, or should we say, untapped groups in engaging entrepreneurship opportunities. So I'm going to try Gagan again. Let's see whether we can hear from you, either from the first question or the second, and then I'll come around again. Okay, sounds like still struggling. So Charmain, it'd be good to hear your thoughts about either government, more broadly government things, or the education system specifically.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the education system, I think that's pretty clear. I think that just putting together anything that's going to provide people with an earlier education, and to stop making people feel like they're insignificant or less than from an earlier stage, so they're more zealous when they come to looking for startup capital. I think that that's always going to be something that's really important. But I think it's also really important to understand that these groups are generally over-mentored and underfunded. So it does always still come back to the money. And I don't want to keep going back there, but it does always come back there. A lot of these groups are really well educated. The traction of their products is insurmountable, and they just still aren't getting funded. So I think it always returns back to that. Of course, there is an education piece, but it's about the coming together and about being able to, I guess people could fund research. I think that would really help, rather than just asking random questions. I think the three of us, even just on this call, are very different to each other, even though we all come from similar backgrounds. We come from very different backgrounds, and we have different outtakes. So we still represent the Black population very differently to each other. So I think kind of making sure that we're aware of that. People like Erika are doing research that could do with funding. Right now she's bootstrapping that. Being able to plow the right capital from the right people who genuinely want to help is going to help us move the needle, because it's going to prove that these numbers aren't just getting plucked from thin air. Within the UK, very heavily, it appears that Black people, specifically Black women, are invisible, because the stats are very little to none. So a lot of the time we have to lean on American statistics, which isn't very helpful for us, because then when we're dealing with Europe or the UK, they're like, okay, well, this doesn't appeal, it doesn't impact us directly. So I think that that's definitely something that we can do, and I'll let the others have a word in, and I'll move on.
Yeah, as a researcher, I kind of, completely back the idea of that we need more research in the space. We saw that with the equity funding gap for male versus female entrepreneurs, which has narrowed recently, although still has a long way to go. When that data was revealed, I mean, we were one of the organisations involved with that. Then, you realised what the issue was, and that, for example, we released a report on follow-on funding showing that on this particular issue, that female entrepreneurs that had raised the first round went on to raise an equal amount to other as male-led teams as well. So in that particular kind of issue, we could show that actually there's go on to be as successful, at least driven in terms of the market perception. So there's definitely, I think we need that exactly that data for various groups as well. Sorry, I interrupted.
It's okay. I think that just leading back to that, I think that the reason why it's really important for us to cover that is because when we look at the dire numbers that are in the US, the last kind of numbers that we had were $36,000 was the amount that was invested in as a first check for Black women, and 1.2 million for their white male counterparts. And that was a long time ago that study was done. I doubt those numbers have moved at all. And that is when Black female founders are getting anything at all, because they receive just about 1% of funding. So if we could have those numbers in the UK, I'm sure that it would actually be worth significantly. But right now we're just speculating. But we need those shocking figures to be able to push people into work, because one of the studies that I did see last year was saying that a lot of people didn't actually believe that there was racism. This was obviously before the Black Lives Matter marches, but because there was so much diversity conversations, they were like, well, people are doing things about this, you know, people are talking about it. We've had 3 meetings at work. What more do you want? So now we need the statistics and the capital, and then the statistics that will follow Ez and I's investments to say, actually, this is what they did. This is the money they received. This is what they did with it. This is how they deployed their capital. And this is how we can see the British economy is now flourishing a little bit more because people open their eyes.
Great. Erika, it's good to kind of set up for to talk about maybe your research and your thoughts around government as well.
Yeah, so with regards to the research, as Charmain said, we are in the process of collecting data at the moment with regards to then analysing to start to understand how much money has been devolved in respect of ethnicity. So we are looking at all businesses that have been started in the last 10 years. We are then going to break that down by ethnicity and gender, as well as educational background, so we can start to have a look at the impacts of socioeconomic status on the ability to attract investment as well. Because when people are speaking about diversity, often we speak about gender, and occasionally we look at ethnicity, but very rarely do we look at social class. And I think that social class is one of the biggest determinants as to whether someone is able to successfully raise investment and to what level. And I think that there is a propensity to target unproductive entrepreneurship to those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, which then exacerbates the problem that many people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are living at. 60% of people are living below the median poverty line, which is not good for the economy because of the fact that it leads to crime and ill education and all of the many issues that then make those communities particularly more disproportionately affected by pandemics such as COVID, etc. And there we have a vicious cycle. So we're trying to look at the research as to how we may be able to funnel and direct capital to where it's most needed, and also to look at the returns to untapped founders, because what we're starting to see is that actually when a little bit of money is given, a lot is returned. There's been some statistics from the Kaufman Fellows over in the States earlier this year that showed that investment in diverse entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that were diverse by way of ethnicity returns up to 30% more than their white counterparts. Now, what that means is that LPs are actually leaving money on the table by not actively pursuing this area. And we want to get that data as soon as possible so that we can start to actually actively change the status quo. And to answer your first question around what government can do, well, I've crystallized this into the 3 C's, Philip. And what I would say is that we need care. And so that means that we need due care and attention to be paid to this important issue. And at the moment, there isn't due care and attention being paid. We're having people making statements that are tantamount to lip service, and we need to turn those statements into action. And to facilitate that action, the second C is contracts. We need big business, corporate, and government to start to ensure that Black companies that are being founded are given the same and equitable opportunities to gain action and to have contracts with companies within the UK so that they are investable properties. The third is capital. And I would like to say that, you know, based on the last census, we were 3.4% of the UK. If we look at the amount that was invested into venture capital over the last year, matching that sum would mean at least 500 million specifically to Black entrepreneurs. And we would love for the Treasury to look at setting up a co-investment fund to de-risk some of the factors that are stopping LPs at the moment currently investing in people like Charmain and Ezeche, so that we can really start to change and move the needle.
Great, that's really good. Ezeche, do you kind of agree with that, a co-investment fund? You mentioned the British Business Bank earlier. Is that, what do you think that would go some way to kind of solving the problem, or any other ideas?
I think co-investment funds are great, but what we need are people to invest, or organisations to invest in the funds themselves, right? Fundamentally, yeah. So the co-investments are great, but that's really where we need the support. But I guess I want to touch on something, which is that ultimately venture capital can't invest in a lot of early stage companies, like the really, really early stage, which we see a lot of in our particular demographic and cohort. There's reasons for that, but there are fantastic government-backed schemes that do enable that, such as SEIS and EIS investing. And I see a number of comments in the chat here about, well, what can be done? What are you going to do? What can we do? But the biggest change I'd like to see is more people being able to participate in angel funds and invest in these early stage startups. Ultimately, that would make a big change, because something like, I think it's only about 40% of untapped, I'm going to continue, Erika keeps telling me off for saying underrepresented. My other organization is even called Code Untapped, right? But untapped entrepreneurs, only about 40% of them ever receive any funding from venture capital. And that's predominantly because of the stage at which their organizations are at. And we see similar numbers in our pipeline. So it's all about that angel investment and getting that to these individuals. And how do you do that? But the reality is, to become an angel investor, you have to be a sophisticated investor, which means you're either an investment professional or you have a net worth, or you earn over £100,000 a year, basically, right? That's pretty much how it works. And if you're creating a fund that is trying to attract investment into these early stage businesses from the types of people who want to, the reality is that the ticket size to get into one of those funds can be as low as £1,000. Why do I need to earn over £100,000 a year when I can spend thousands of pounds on lottery tickets, right? But I'm not allowed to put £1,000 into a startup. Now, if we look at the odds there, it's ridiculous. The odds of winning the lottery is something like 14.7 million to 1, right? And yet the odds of a startup succeeding, I think you have a 60% loss rate from series to series. So in 5 years' time, if you started off with 100 companies, it's probably about 4 or 5 left in there. That sounds pretty bad, but significantly higher odds than winning the lottery. And yet, if I've got a fund, an angel fund, that is trying to encourage people from untapped backgrounds to support and invest in untapped entrepreneurs, I can't talk to them. I can't market to them unless I know them directly. And yet the National Lottery can put adverts all over the place, attracting people to invest as much cash as they have into buying lottery tickets. So if you want to see one change from the government, change that.
That's a really interesting point. I hadn't kind of considered that before, the kind of regulation, like putting people out of the market. Do you think crowdfunding has, because obviously I guess a lot of people can do that without being sophisticated, does that have a role to play in breaking down the barriers to some degree, or is that a different kind of product?
Well, most crowdfunding platforms, you still have to self-certify, I believe, even to go onto them, right? But also the challenge with crowdfunding is that you still have to qualify to get onto their platform. So I won't name the organization, but there was one particular crowdfunding company that actually reached out to me for help in trying to get more untapped entrepreneurs onto their platform. And again, why are they struggling? Because they have a core requirement, which is you need a cornerstone investor, and you need a certain level of traction, you need a certain type of brand, and you need a certain marketing potential to be successful. So even in a space such as crowdfunding, which is supposed to democratize access to finance, you see the exact same market dynamics at play. So until we are able to encourage fundamentally more untapped individuals to get involved in funding in these platforms, you're not going to see a change. And I'd say that's one of the key things we need to see, which is more people like us, like Charmain, like Erika, actually backing these types of initiatives. I guarantee you, there's a lot of people writing comments in your comment channel who fit in exactly the same demographic who could potentially be supporting in these spaces. I'd love to see them getting involved in that. I'd love to see organizations like NatWest running angel funds, supporting angel funds, and helping people like us back these companies. As Charmain says, there's a lot of mentoring that goes on in the space. Over-mentored, underfunded.
And just to round back on Sharon's question here about what we can do to get young people to engage more, that would be to showcase successful entrepreneurs. The highest possible way of engaging young people will be to show them that people like them make it. We have a plethora of young people wanting to be track athletes and rappers and the like, and that's because they see that as a viable option. We need to start to show them that entrepreneurship is a viable option and that they can actually become successful via this avenue.
Right. I mean, kind of picking up on that point, I listened to an interesting podcast on my way home yesterday with Zadie Smith, and she was talking about growing up, and the culture that she was experiencing was very different to the culture that maybe most people were experiencing at that time. And I guess entrepreneurship is a kind of culture. It's a culture of people knowing each other, or the kind of bug people get for aspiring to be entrepreneurs. Do you see that there's any work to be done in kind of making sure the culture is kind of more representative of different people, or the networks that people have? So the network that, let's say, a person, coming out of an investment bank or something like that has, versus someone who doesn't have those connections with family and various other forms. How can we kind of bring people together so that if someone so that the best ideas win out, rather than who knows the best people? So I'll start with Charmain, and then we'll kind of go around if you have an idea on how we can be more connected.
Yeah, well, I guess you've touched on something that is really important. Community is something that plays a big role. People that go to Ivy League schools, they are already part of a cohort of people and an alumni. So warm introductions are really easy, right? And specifically in areas like venture, warm introductions are the lifeblood, and people generally don't take on very many investments unless they already know someone. And then also in terms of getting into experience across the board in investment banking, etc., those things are there. I think it's really important for these organizations to be able to extend access to people. All that people want, it's specifically Black people who generally are shrugged at and are told, okay, maybe come back and email us a different way. I think that there's a conversation that needs to be had, and I think that there should be I don't want to give anyone anything mandatory, because I think when we make things mandatory, we kind of take away the credit from the person who was taking the time. I know I'm trying not to be distracted by your dog, Erika. I'm a real dog person. I'm like, hello. But I think it's really important to be able to extend networks in a way that makes sense. I don't know what programs are there that outside of just panels and stuff where people want to run off afterwards. Like, how do people make things inclusive in a way that is going to give people time with people who actually feel like, oh, you are a human, you're a nice human, and actually we have more in common than I would initially have thought. Sometimes I think that it's important to take certain initiatives so that people have stuff more in common. It's not just about the work, it's about stuff that happens outside. It's about yacht clubs, it's about polo clubs, it's about playing golf. Some of the most important people that I've met or investors into my fund I've met on the golf course, a lot of women, a lot of Black people, a lot of Black women, and a lot of people from working class backgrounds don't tend to spend time in those places. Number one, because they're expensive, so maybe sponsoring people to get involved and to actually mentor in that way rather than just a direct counseling type relationship is always good, because you build a real rapport with someone. 4 hours on the golf course, where else are you going to get that time? I think that those, tennis is great. And just kind of being able to build different types of skills that also attribute to the whole picture. Because when you have stuff in common with people, your dog, for example, Erika, it made us all feel like a little bit more warm. If you like dogs, if you don't, you maybe not. But it's a thing that's in common, and it's a thing that aligns us as humans. I think COVID made us all feel a bit more human. Being at home and seeing each other's doorbells ring, it makes us feel more human. Being able to relate to things in those rooms that we may not have been able to do so before are really important. And I think when we're thinking of initiatives, I think when we think of them like that, it makes it a bit more humanizing rather than actually, I'm just going to go help this little black kid from Peckham.
Great. That's really good and thorough. Ez, what about your thoughts? I guess you obviously do have experience working in investment banks and the kind of that world. So what have you learned from kind of your experiences of all of that?
Yeah, you touch on a really fascinating point. So I mean, for me, I was a kid from Lewisham, southeast London. I went to a school where the 5A to C pass rate was 14%, right? The idea of someone from my background ending up in an investment bank and then ending up as an entrepreneur and then ending up as a venture capitalist was just unheard of, right? Just not even on the radar of myself or my teachers. So you have a real problem there, which I don't know how you fundamentally solve, which is that you simply cannot create the networks that a lot of these people will have. So you quite rightly touched on the fact that I ended up in Lehman Brothers and then Credit Suisse. And a lot of the people I know in those environments, they went to school at Eton, Harrow, they went to Cambridge, Oxford. These are people who grew up with people whose friends then went on to become traders, accountants, financiers, bankers, lawyers. These are, straight away, after about 5 to 10 years, what you now have is a core group of people who have the skills, have the connections, and have the cash to get you funded, right? Without even doing anything. All they had to do was go to school. That was it. Turn up every day, go to school, and in 10 years' time, they have that network. You cannot replicate that. So how do you solve for this? And again, I think someone in the chat, again, I'm keeping my eyes on this, really touched on a really, really important point, which is that most people from our backgrounds don't come to entrepreneurship until they're in their late 20s, right? By which we've already spent a period of time on the conveyor belt where at age 12, we had to decide our GCSEs based on our interests, our parents' interests, and our friends' interests. Those GCSEs decided what A-levels we then went on to do. Those A-levels decided what degree, if at all, we went on to do, which then determined what job we went on to do. And frankly, most of our friends at school probably aren't doing the job that we're in or in any of those areas if we've gone into finance, right? So you have a massive problem. At which point, if they suddenly decide, okay, I want to go and create a startup, they have zero network, okay? They have no support. There is no system there to help protect them as they make that jump. Now, one of the things, I spent 5 years in Switzerland. They had this astonishing system whereby if you're out of work, you go into their welfare system for the next 2 years, during which they'll cover 80% of your income, right? Capped, a fairly reasonable amount. But what it meant was, so if you lost your job or if you needed to retrain, the state would protect you and allow you to do that. But even better, if you wanted to build a business, they would do the same thing until you get your first client. What that gives you is freedom to fail. That gives you genuine social mobility, rather than the nonsense we have in this country about expanding grammar schools and the rest of it and trying to recreate these networks in people who just don't have access to it. If you want to recreate the networks, abolish private schools. That's the number one thing you could do, right? Abolish them. That would make a big difference. But then our schools are still based on catchment areas. So what you then have is wealthy areas where only rich kids can go to, will only have rich kids in those schools. It's a very, very difficult system to break apart. So the only thing you can genuinely do is provide people with those safety nets, which unfortunately we've seen even at the abysmally low levels that we've had in this country for the last however long, get stripped away over the last 10 years. So hopefully the situation we're seeing now gives us an opportunity to reset. because huge amounts of money are suddenly being found to spend on entrepreneurs, people, to help protect the economy from the disaster that has befallen it. But let's hope they don't just switch the keys back off and go back to business as usual, because that's going to be a serious problem.
That sort of mechanism that you talk about is one reason that people think the kind of startup rate in the US has kind of dropped off, because there's a huge student debt. Therefore, people are, just need to get a job, and therefore they're not kind of risk takers. They're not starting so many businesses. So that's, I can see that that's a really kind of. Can
I touch on a really horrible story I heard about that? This fantastic entrepreneur I met. She was from America. She went to Harvard Business School. She had first-class degree. It cost her something like £70,000-80,000 to get that education, which she'd had to borrow. She was unable to build a business because her debt-to-income ratio was so far out of line, she couldn't raise the cash she needed to build a company, even though she had this phenomenal education. Yet her peers were able to go on and raise loads of cash because of their backgrounds, because they hadn't had to borrow money. Access to education isn't the only part of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Erika, what are kind of your thoughts on the issues that have been raised so far?
So I think that actually all roads kind of lead back to what Ez was saying before about creating some of these angel networks and some opportunities to provide early investment into founders that are from untapped communities. Because oftentimes what happens is that in addition to that, so I will happily say that I'm from a very working class background myself. I went to university in 2017, but then graduated in the top 2% of my class. So and that was for an MBA, and I was able to do the MBA because I had scaled a business before, and they took that in place of having an undergraduate degree. What I will say is that actually, because of the fact that we place so much reliance on networks and having been to some of the elite schools, we miss opportunities. We've had 3 displays of Black excellence just here on this call. We all have a lot to offer. We've all run businesses that have been successful in one way or another. Sorry about this dog today. And that is being masked by continuing with exactly the same way that we have historically done things, which is based on meritocracy rather than meritocracy. And so I think that, one, if we're able to provide the money that would have been friends and family money, or the state is able to provide some sort of cushion for people to start businesses from underrepresented groups or untapped groups, particularly when those groups or when those entrepreneurs are going to be solving problems for the groups that they come from, because then you get a double win and indeed a triple bottom line. I think that that's going to be the single most effective thing that can be done. So it really does hearken on to the 2 points that Ezeche made.
Great. We have a question here around kind of why aren't we focusing on socioeconomic inequalities rather than instead of BAME, basically. And I guess this also brings a question, differences between different communities. So for example, and I'm not conflating the two, but we did a report on immigrant entrepreneurs, and obviously a lot of them were ethnic, well, in this case, tapped ethnic talent. So these were the fastest growing companies. We looked at their, in the UK, we looked at where the founders were born. Half of them effectively were born outside the UK. Many of them with an ethnic background. But so they're obviously doing very well for themselves. But it probably wasn't diverse in as much as it wasn't representative of all different ethnicities. So how do we kind of deal with these different groups? Some perhaps being, above averagely successful. Some groups below average at the moment. So Charmain.
I think that that's a really important point, and the great thing about that is that we do cover that as well. I think that what we have to do is to get to the real heart of it, because when you're from a social economic background that has disadvantages, then you have disadvantages. But when you also have all of the others, like being a Black woman from a working class background, for example, then you have a few more hurdles. So if we can conquer all of those hurdles in one, then we can work backwards. And I think that that's better than us doing a bottom-up approach. I think that my fund, for example, we look at we call them underventured, still under, but underventured founders, where people aren't looking, and class plays a role in that. And I think it's really important, especially when building a fund, because when you're building a fund, especially if you're Black and you're female, the chance of you being from a background that is, you know, social economically deprived is significantly higher. But you have to put skin in the game, so you have to invest in your fund as well. I think people think you just pluck this money out. So the way the infrastructure is set up is it's already set against us anyway, because we already know that the chance of us not having any money is great. We know the chance of us not getting the investment is great. We know the chances of us not being as fortunate as Ez and being able to go to those schools and get that, you know, that degree and that level of financial education are already tampered. So if we're able to have those things, and then we also have the hurdle now that there is a systematic way to keep us out. Whether or not it's intentional or not, it is in place. And those are the type of things that can make a big change. Saying, actually, we really want to help emerging fund managers. And the way we're going to do this, we're going to raise their entry barrier. We're going to consider that this is a very different fund. We're not going to treat it like a philanthropic project. And I say project in inverted commas, because that's how it's treated. It's like, oh no, maybe you should go and have a look at one of the impact sectors. But the returns are what we're discussing with you. But because you're looking at me and I'm discussing diversity, you're making it into being a HR issue, which it's not, and it's clearly not. I don't know if any of you saw the article recently from the woman who applied for capital, Black woman who applied for capital from Sequoia, was rejected. And then her husband, who was East Asian, had the Silicon Valley background that you know, everybody desires, applied the same business, the same demographics, the same market opportunity, everything was in place apart from who was the founder, and they said yes. So this is a clear example of where we come in, and it's not just because it's a poor me issue, it's not a HR issue, it's actually, this is the best way to invest your money. And this is where it comes down to, it's all a bottom line. Yes, society needs to do something as a whole, but realistically, we're talking about financial markets. And if we can conquer the Black working class female, especially if she's someone from LGBTQI background, then we've conquered all of them. And now we can look at things on an equal platform rather than differentiating all of those things. So if we go for the highest, you know, in the movies, they will show you to hit the largest bully, right? This is what we're trying to do. If we break down the largest bully, then we can start to really distribute the wealth and the opportunity, and that's what we really want to do. So good question, but that would be my answer to that.
Great. And Erika, do you have anything to add to that question at all?
I think that Charmain's comprehensively covered it. It really is just to hammer home the fact that this is the problem with BAME, is that you will not find or be able to distinguish between a South Asian male who is middle class versus a Black female that's working class. And if someone has a BAME quota, they're absolutely able to hit it with people that are infinitely more palatable than I. And therein lies the problem, because the most palatable get the majority of the support, and the those that are considered least palatable don't get any of it at all. So I will be very, very surprised if when we start to break down BAME through the research that we're doing at Extend Ventures, if we find that Black people on the whole get more than 1% of venture funding. I think that we'll find that there's probably 5 or 6% that's going to BAME, and this is an estimation, let me make that clear, but if you're getting 4 or 5% going to one particular group and very, very little going to another, then we need to start to break this down and to look at it in smaller sections, so that we can then turn around and make things a lot more fair and equitable.
Great, that's yeah. I guess my final question is kind of personal one and useful for me to understand. So obviously, it's great that you guys have kind of agreed to do this, but I'm conscious of, if you guys must get asked to do lots of these sorts of things. So how do you, as kind of obviously as business people, as financiers, kind of weigh up the value of you doing things like this and speaking out and being role models versus kind of getting on with your business, getting stuff done? And also another question that kind of ties into this is, I guess you're kind of being asked to do things like this for free, or being asked to kind of give your time. And how can we, and I guess other organisations who are on this call, have spotted a few different comments from people who would similarly, no doubt, ask you and want you to be on the calls. How can we kind of make use of it so it's valuable for you, so it isn't just, lots of these things and lots of talking? Because we're good at events, we're good at talking. We want to get stuff done as well, though. That's really what matters. So how can we make that happen? So Erika, did you want to go?
I will. I'll happily go first and say that firsthand, Philip, that I won't agree to anything anymore in terms of speaking unless I am able to secure tangible action for the community. And to that end, I'd like to thank you for announcing at the beginning of this call that ethnicity has now been added to the list of priorities for the APPG, and you will now be consulting with myself, and I will be consulting with the entire community to ensure that the voice of our community is going to be heard when you are pushing things forward in Parliament on behalf of entrepreneurship. So I think it is infinitely important that people are not simply asking Black founders, Black venture capitalists to speak without payment. Therein lies the problem, that we are being undervalued because if the amount of times I've spoken on panels as well and then been asked for consultancy afterwards in terms of doing some research or looking at people's ability to capture ethnicity, and then when I say actually this is a piece of consultancy, these are my rates for consultancy, people say, oh no, but I just wanted a half an hour chat. I think that things like this cannot continue. We need to value Black businesses, we need to value Black entrepreneurs, we need to value Black venture capitalists and start to see what we have before us. I think we've lost Philip.
So do I. I think he's gone. I think that was a really good point. As long as you guys can still hear, I guess Philip could pop back on. But I think it's also really important to mark that we're already dealing with a group that people don't believe in.
So sorry about that. I'll let you carry on. I don't know why I dropped off there, but there we go.
Yeah, it's really we're dealing with a subset of entrepreneurs that people already don't believe in. We should be spending more time with them, as much time as we can, because we are founder first organizations, because we have to be. But we have to take time out now to come and have this conversation, which it should go without saying, but we're here and we're having to have this conversation. I think that you're right. I think that we should be paid, and where we can't be paid with money for any other reason, then people should be getting people involved that can help to move the needle, and asking questions that deliberately incites a discomfort in a way that's going to make people want to make change. Philip, I have a question for you that I often have for anyone who's our ally. What has made this an interesting topic for you? What has made this something that you want to move the needle on, and how do we make more people that look like you?
I guess for me, it's one where I hadn't really given it much thought in terms of the work we're doing with the Entrepreneurs Network. It feels quite diverse in as much as we're a relatively new organisation. We have lots of different people from different backgrounds, so we're quite lucky in that way. We're not like other business organisations, and I guess I thought that was enough, I suppose, in terms of what we were doing, without consciously thinking that. I think what I'd really like to do is build something. We have a female entrepreneurship group, build a similar thing around kind of ethnic minorities, and basically try and champion individuals. I've got to get the right terminology. Champion individuals, but also think about ways, I suppose, that we can broaden it out so we have as many different speakers as possible with different backgrounds within that, and also different perspectives as well. So there's a real kind of open debate, because I guess that's the issue at the moment. It feels as though there's probably people that obviously yourselves, that people that everyone will go to for comment and for broadcast opportunities. Whereas I think what we can offer as a network is, we've got hundreds and hopefully, kind of thousands of entrepreneurs who are willing to kind of engage and comment. So I think that's what we can offer. And obviously the research side as well would be supporting kind of Erika with her endeavours there and trying to connect her into some funding and to support. So I saw that Bohurst mentioned that they have some data. So Bohurst we work with already, and they're great as a kind of data provider. So hopefully we can make a connection there. So yeah, that's.
Also, I think what's really good for organisations such as NatWest, RBS, and any other corporations is where they don't want to invest as LPs into funds, is to looking at ways that they can do sponsorship programs. It's very expensive to be a fund manager. And we're trying to do something that's good. And if you really want to move the needle, it's great to be able to run programs. But as I said earlier, there's a lot of over-mentored, underfunded individuals within the space. So helping us to help you to move the needle also goes a long way. And we are really grateful for platforms like this. It's just that we need to make sure that it's more than just a conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I missed the middle bit. Ez, did you have a chance to say your final words or not?
Oh, I mean, I don't need to say much. Charmain and Erika are just absolutely smashing it. I think, just to echo a lot of what they've said, partly, outreach and speaking to the community is part of what we do, and it's part of my job as well, fundamentally. And it depends on the organisation who's reaching out to me. Do I see there being value in me supporting them? But organisations such as yourselves have the ways and means. I'd much rather see concrete outcomes from these types of talks, rather than just talk about the challenges. We've got an audience of people who are already bought into this, right? They already believe in this, otherwise they probably wouldn't have logged in. I'd rather see there be more concrete conversations with people who are in positions to actually make change and to have those discussions in the open with those people, right? And get them to explain to the public why they're not supporting the kind of initiatives that we're talking about. That's what I would like to see more of.
And final words, we want the 3 C's. We need people's care and due attention. We need contract, and we need access to capital. And if people can actually take that away and start to say, how can I give capital, contracts and care to any of the 3 of us on this call, or any other Black founders that that would be amazing.
Brilliant. I mean, yeah, that's definitely our homework. So thank you so much. I mean, that's a great way to end it, and really insightful. And, I've certainly learned a lot. And thank you again for your time. And the next webinar will be one where we're definitely we'll come with something to the table with what we've done, and also have people on who have something to say or something to answer, as well as to what they can or should be doing. So yeah, that will be in September. I'll kind of update everyone that's been on here with details if they get in touch with me. But all it leaves me to thank NatWest obviously for hosting this, and we'll have conversations with them as well about the stuff that they're doing and to the speakers. So thanks again for your time, and obviously the audience as well. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.